Smart Wellington is the capital city's smart city program, one that has been focused around societal challenges, an integrated innovation ecosystem, and the embrace of technological advancements. Today, we are fortunate enough to have with us Sean O'Dane, the city's innovation lead, to talk to us through some of the city's journey along the Smart City program. Sean, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks, Chris.
Maybe we could start a conversation around the Smart Wellington program, its genesis, the lead role taken by the city, and where the journey has evolved from and where are we today?
Our journey began back in 2011 when we passed the Smart Capital Plan. That was the integrated strategy for the city, and it was to last until 2040, so we're about halfway through it now. What happened was, in about 2012, we said, yep, we've said we're going to become a smart city, but what does that actually mean? And the best way to learn is by doing. So we began to look at what is a smart city, how is that evolving, and what are the factors we're going to deal with. A lot of that was understanding, as our physical and digital worlds come together, what are the roles of government, what are the roles of citizens, how are those roles changing over time, and what does that conversation look like? Whilst there were questions about how does council improve the way it serves and improves the way the city grows, a lot of it was understanding what is council's place in this new world, and how can we work with our public sector partners, the NGOs, the society, the city, and the citizens themselves to create this new city we need.
So what role did the City Council take on early on in the development of the Smart Wellington?
So early on, it was a case of finding partners and starting to understand what the smart city journey would look like for us. One of the first things we did was to begin to support our civic tech community. So groups like Hack Miramar, GovHack. And we did that by first attending some of their events, getting to understand what their data needs were and beginning to release much more open data than we had previously. And that also gave us the ability to have our councillors attend to those events. So, for example, the last time GovHack was held here in Wellington, we got hundreds of people together, people from university graduates all the way through to interested community members, to the Governor-General. They all worked together to co-create different solutions. And most importantly, it gave a place where our councillors could immerse themselves in that community and begin to understand what do things like digital rights look like when they're applied to a city. What are the questions they need to ask public servants like myself in order to govern this journey? And it helped them understand that things can be done a different way.
What role did the councillors play in all of this? And was it the community driving some of this change in terms of looking at new solutions, new ways of doing things, or was it all driven through council leadership?
It's both. So with those examples in the GovTech and hacking space, it was very much community-led, and we were learning from our community. In some of the areas to do with our operations, that was much more led by public servants ourselves and by councillors. There were things like understanding how our grant funding went into the city. So that was partnering with the central government and council's own capability to release that data, but also provide information for those who don't use data to understand where does the money go into our communities, what are the opportunities to co-fund different initiatives, and how can we start to orient funding around impact.
Okay. There's a lot of talk around government acting as a platform and an institution that orchestrates and organises as opposed to basically providing solutions and services directly to the community. Have you seen that evolve in the context of the council where the government acts as a platform, integrating the different parts of the ecosystem?
One of the difficulties is government doesn't really require solutions, we require positions. So because unlike a private company, we exist in perpetuity in relationship to the societies we serve. For every solution that's adopted, there'll be a new solution that comes along as needs change. So we have to be able to adapt. And so that leads to a more positional form of governance. What we've found evolving is an understanding that local government is an agency devoted to place. So if you look at how we're organised, we're designed to care for the cities and communities we serve. If you look at the central government, they're arranged by case. So if you're sick, it's the Ministry of Health and the District Health Boards for you. If you're ignorant, it's the Education Ministry, and so on for almost every aspect of life. What that means is there's an intersection between the cases that occur within people's lives and the places they happen, and that provides us room to collaborate. So if you look at where that begins to take government, it's less a platform and more understanding how do we fuse these different roles government plays together so that we can provide the services our citizens expect from us. So one of the great debates in the smart city world is should we be a data-driven city or not? I'm very much of the opinion that we should be an informed democracy. So at its heart, there are certain decisions that are not amenable to data. They have to be moral decisions. And it can be dangerous to assume that you can use data to drive those decisions. There's also a degree of responsibility. So in a data-driven city, you can begin to divorce your responsibility to the machines. In an informed democracy, it's much more about using that data to help understand the people you're serving and help ballast your arguments. But it doesn't remove your responsibility to make a decision.
The last question for me in this segment is to talk about the next frontier for the Smart Wellington program and going forward. And are there international benchmarks for the city?
Because we began our journey relatively early, we're coming up to a period where we need to re-examine what we do. So that involves putting a smart city roadmap in place, re-examining that strategic vision and understanding the codes of practice. So effectively in our first generation, what we were doing is proving, yes, smart cities is a thing. We can create tools which transform lives, which transform the way council works with government, NGOs and the community. Now the challenge in the second generation is how do we scale all of that up? How do you move from a prototype to everyday use at scale? To do that, we need to develop those codes of practice for how the city deals with different types of issues and different types of technologies. We also need to evolve some of the governance to a further level, and that's around understanding things like what are our duties of care in the digital world to different communities? What does governance at a democratic level look like now, and what does governance at an executive level look like? there are some really knotty questions in that as well. So a lot of the tech world works off the idea of participatory democracy. The idea is everybody has a say, we come to a consensus, and that's what we do. As a city, we work off representative democracy. We elect people to make decisions for us. How we reconcile those two concepts is a rapidly evolving conversation, and some of the biggest issues in the city depend on it. So some of that misunderstanding and engagement and consultation processes between people thinking it's a vote, we need to get as many people involved in this so that we have the greatest number of people on one side, versus what is actually happening, which is the purpose of these processes is to advise the people you elected about what the situation of this issue is and come up with ideas for solutions. As we become much more engaged in the digital space, that question becomes much, much more important.